From the deepest gorge to the soaring peaks, from the land of rugged beauty to the world's most active volcanoes, filmed with cutting-edge technology, this series brings you breathtaking landscapes and diverse wildlife. America's National Parks starts 16 September, Friday, 7 p.m. on Nat Geo Wild.
Hey y'all, my name is Hyatt Mamoun and I'm a wildlife filmmaker and presenter. And today I'm with the incredibly talented and incredibly cool team behind National Geographic's newest series, America's National Parks. In today's installment of Red's Behind the Look series, I'm going to be diving right into picking these storytellers' minds with you all, learning all about their experiences shooting in America's most diverse environments. From Erin shooting in Alaska's Lake Clark to Tom and Phoebe Fitz shooting in Biscayne National Park, which is my backyard here in Florida. We're going to learn all about what it takes to catch America's wildlife in action up close and personal. So this is a super cool series for me personally, as one of my missions is to highlight the unique wildlife of the United States and to inspire Americans to get out and explore what's in their own backyards. So first of all, I want to say thank y'all for joining me today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start by having y'all introduce yourselves and what national parks you focused on. So since we're on Zoom, it'll be easier for me to call on each of you so we avoid the Zoom lag, which ends up in me cutting folks off and people cutting each other off on accident. So I may take a moment to respond just to make sure that it hasn't gotten to me. So let's start. What wildlife did you focus on? And I'll start with you guys, the Fitzes.
Phoebe, take it away.
Hi guys, I'm Phoebe Fitz, and I'm lucky enough to get to work with my dad, Tom, and we worked on Biscayne National Park. So we filmed in mangroves and with manatees, some nesting turtles, some butterflies. We got the whole array. I feel very lucky to have gotten to work on that national park episode, and especially as a Floridian. I grew up in Florida and I live in Miami, and it was really, really awesome to kind of get to dive into the ecosystems that I'm surrounded by, but might not necessarily be in all the time.
Nicely put. I feel kind of nicely introduced by you, so thanks, Phoebe. Yeah, I think really for me, I'd love to add that the Biscayne National Park is, I think, not that easily accessible unless you have a boat, and so it was really fun to get to know that part of Florida. So I'm pretty thankful that we had the weeks that we had there. It's just a spectacular place.
It truly is. And Erin, what did you work on?
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a wildlife camerawoman, and I worked on Lake Clark National Park in Alaska. I did sea otters, shorebirds, a little bit of eagles. It was really cool. It's exciting. Sea otters are always interesting. My family worked on sea otter studies in Alaska, flying the sea otter studies for a long time. So I seemed to be around sea otters quite a bit, so it was pretty good.
I got to have a look at that, and the sea otters were so cute, especially the little baby. I'm so excited for y'all to see that. But anyway, Jeff, what did you work on?
Hey, I'm Jeff Hester. I'm based in San Diego, California, and I worked mostly on the Channel Islands episode. So we were filming sea lions, Garibaldi, sheephead and urchins, the kelp forest. So pretty much mostly underwater, doing some pelican stuff with topside gimbal and some sea lions with topside gimbal. And kind of similar to Biscayne, the Channel Islands are only reachable by boat. And so just amazing to be able to work in my backyard and to really showcase this place that is like really special to me.
And Alex, what did you work on?
I did some shooting on the Tetons and Voyagers episode, but most of the time spent doing the topside in Channel Islands National Park. And like Jeff, grew up in California, so it was amazing for me to be able to kind of get out and explore my own backyard and spend more time than I ever would have thought I would in the Channel Islands and really digging into some of the adorable creatures that call that place their home.
Yay! So that is such a huge array of places and environments. And Alex, you mentioned that you filmed everywhere from the Channel Islands to Voyagers. Could you tell me what you found were the biggest differences in shooting going between such different places?
Yeah, I think that whereas like Tom and Phoebe were saying and Jeff has mentioned, the Channel Islands are a set of islands off of the coast of California. And so just accessibility to the different parks, as we're very lucky to be employed and get to go visit these parks. So some of them are quite hard to get to, and Channel Islands is a 2 to 3 hour boat ride sometimes, depending on the weather. And Voyagers is kind of up in the middle of nowhere in the north of America, so it's quite a long drive. I think from where we flew in, it's about a 4 or 5 hour drive. So the biggest difference for me was just kind of the logistically getting to those areas. And then once you're there, obviously the habitats vary so much, and the species there. So yeah, it's just amazing to be able to get to see so many different places in America, and especially the protected places like our national parks.
So I think it's super important to be able to bring people, these national parks, into their home, because a lot of people won't be able to access these ones like Biscayne and and Channel Islands, because you were mentioning you need a boat. So this is so important to bring people their national parks into their homes. So Erin, you shot in Alaska, which I know is your specialty. And I just want to mention that Erin helped host a big wildlife camerawoman meetup near an Olympic National Park recently, which I went to, which was so much fun. And we had such a great time filming and getting a taste for the Pacific Northwest, which was cold and damp. And I assume that Lake Clark is colder and damper. So what sort of challenges did you come across filming at Lake Clark?
Yeah, so if you see the footage of the otters, it looks really sunny. I think that was like one day. The rest of my days were spent in the rain and the snow. I got about every bad coastal weather that you could imagine hit me during this time. I was actually by myself shooting. It was during the pandemic, so I would get dropped off on islands and then spend the day out by myself, kind of hoping the sea otters would come in. They're pretty skittish in that area especially. So yeah, I spent a lot of time. I had a lot of gear, a lot of rain gear, a lot of snow gear, like switching between the two. So yeah, Alaska likes to be temperamental, especially in the spring and especially on the coast.
You mentioned you were dropped there by yourself. Were you really like truly alone?
Yeah, so my uncle was the boat captain for the shoot, and he would drop me off on the islands and then come and get me later. Since it was the pandemic, they didn't want to send out a full crew, and it was just easiest, since I knew the area, to just let me kind of get on with it, and then I'd have to report back. It is challenging when you're reporting back every day, like the weather was pretty terrible. But I did spend the terrible days out filming shorebirds, so it wasn't like I was sitting in my room. If we couldn't go out in the boat, then I'd go film shorebirds instead.
Well, that's as COVID safe as it gets, if I ever heard it. So doing a whole 180, Tom and Phoebe, y'all shot in Florida, which takes a whole different set of skills and equipment. What sort of challenges did y'all come across? You didn't happen to shoot during hurricane season, did you?
Well, we did, but we can avoid the hurricanes. I'll jump in with, I think, for me at least, one of the biggest challenges was sort of a fun juxtaposition. It started as one of the most sort of joyful shoots, working with butterflies with some scientists in Gainesville from the University of Florida. And I started in a little greenhouse, really, and there were butterflies everywhere. It was pleasant. They had fans going, so there was a nice breeze for the heat, and it was super. And then we went south, met up with Phoebe, and we went out to Elliott Key, which is the last place on the planet where you can find this type of butterfly. And the scientists there are releasing them. And it's a hammock on Elliott Key. It was in June. It was really hot, really humid, and it is as mosquito, ridden as any place can be. So you have to dress appropriately, which means everything is covered, and you've got a hood coming over with a mesh net in front of you that you can unzip for a bite of some food once in a while and then zip back up. And when we got there, we were dropped off, by the scientists, and they left to go get some of their gear. And honestly, within 15 seconds, right in front of your face, there are about 40 mosquitoes that are just going, trying to get in. And, the working conditions were challenging. You're dripping sweat, you're pouring sweat. And to get your eye into the viewfinder with this mesh thing in front, the whole thing was really, really challenging. I think that was my biggest challenge, to be honest. Phoebe, I don't know about you.
Oh, I second that. Yeah, just the noise of that amount of mosquitoes coming to try and eat you was pretty wild. And yeah, I mean, we were covered up, but they're biting through 2 layers of clothes. I mean, it was wild. And it definitely speaks to how zen I would say Tom is because I was kind of like, smacking around trying to fight them off, and he was calm looking at the viewfinder. And I mean, it was really, really cool to see the end sequence. But yeah, it was really challenging, and definitely for the underwater parts. I mean, I'm more of an underwater gal. I like those shoots the best. And there were tons of mosquitoes in there too, but occasionally we'd swallow them through our snorkel, but that was it. So I really liked the underwater portion of the mangroves because you got out of the way of the mosquitoes.
I can say I have never sucked in a mosquito through my snorkel yet, but as a Southerner, I know that these mosquitoes are no joke. Everybody talks about the gators in Florida being a problem, and they have no idea. These mosquitoes are literally the size of pterodactyls. Okay, maybe not literally, but they are huge, and they have the white stripes on their legs. And yeah, when you go out, they're just right on specifically my face. And yeah, they bite through clothes. That was something I had to learn. Now, I grew up in Georgia, and the mosquitoes didn't really bite through clothes there, so they build them different in Florida. But anyway, Alex, you filmed the scrub jays, which I know filming birds can be very complicated at high speed. So could you expand on those challenges?
Yeah, so we were tasked with filming the island scrub jay, which is responsible for spreading the oak trees on the Channel Islands. And they do this by taking the acorns and then caching them, and they forget where a lot of the ones they've cached are, and these ones then in turn grow into these oak trees, and they're actually one of the main reason why the oaks are proliferating and spreading through the islands and growing. And so it was really fascinating. It took us a while to find where the birds were going and follow their patterns from where they're taking the acorns from to where they're going and stashing them. But the most interesting thing was we were filming them sort of at a normal speed. And then it was only when we had the high speed camera, we were using a wave and shooting at about 400 frames a second. And it was only when we were actually using that camera that we could see, when we slowed down the footage, what the birds were doing, which was fascinating because even with our eyes, we were watching them, but we couldn't see the behavior because it was happening so quickly. And so it was amazing to watch them. They would pick up the acorns, pull them off the trees, and then shake them and spin them around in their beak to see if they were still ripe or if they'd been infected by insects. And this is something that just from watching it with our naked eye, we hadn't seen, but it was only when you slowed it down, you got to witness. And it was amazing. We got a few shots that we didn't know we'd got until afterwards, where we've got one where the scrub jay picks up an acorn and then it slips out of its beak and it manages to catch it again. But it all happens in a fraction of a second. So it's only when you actually sit down and watch it that you get to see it again. And especially with birds that are moving so quickly, it was amazing to be able to have the high-speed camera to be able to draw out those moments and make them last a bit longer, and to really get to see and experience the behavior as it's happening.
That's the kind of thing where I always think, like, do birds perceive time different than us, because they're just moving so fast. And we just recently did something on the hummingbirds, and they were also moving so quickly that they were having whole behaviors that happened in a half a second. So that always shows how important it is to shoot different animals at different frame rates so you can actually catch their behaviors. And so, Jeff, you shot underwater in the Channel Islands, which I know is a lot colder than than Biscayne National Park. I always say Key Biscayne because I go there all the time. But so I know that it's a lot colder and a lot more kelpy, right? So you were filming the fish just absolutely wrecking those sea urchins. So what sort of challenges come with that? What was that like?
Yeah, I'd say there were a lot of challenges. So I think we filmed over a period of about a year and a half trying to accomplish a variety of sequences out there. And I think, Santa Barbara Island was the main place we were working and shooting underwater. And for us, it's like 60, 70 miles offshore one way. And so it's just like 2-3 hours to get out there. It's a long ride. It's really hard to predict what the weather's going to be like out there. It's this little, some people affectionately refer to it as the dirt clod. It's this little like island that looks just like dirt that pops up out of the ocean. There's not much protection. So I think, one of the things that we kept running into was we would, wake up super early, get to the boat, load up, spend all the time getting out to the island, and then conditions were just unworkable. Either, the swell was wrapping around the island where, we just couldn't do anything. It was too surgy, or visibility wasn't what was expected. We'd have a chlorophyll bloom and it'd just be super green and we couldn't work. So I think that was some of the most frustrating things, the most challenging things, was just so much time that, not wasted, because it was you still get to be on the ocean. You still sometimes get to get in the water, and that's always enjoyable. But yeah, and then we finally get these key days that were just like, when everything finally came together, and it was glorious. Because Santa Barbara Island, when it's good, I think it's one of the best places in the world to dive, and especially for kelp. I think it's incredible. But yeah, so yeah, lots and lots of challenges. One time we showed up at the dock, and we had there had just been an underwater earthquake, and we had a tsunami warning. And so we were at the dock, and the tide was shifting by about 8 feet every 10 minutes. And we were just like, what is happening right now? So we still decided to go, which was, it was interesting diving. We were just kind of getting blown all over the reef, but still fun. It was a good time, and we eventually made it happen. So.
Well, that's one of the things about wildlife film, is that some days you're going to go out there and the conditions are just crazy. You can't shoot, like, again, in Florida, I keep mentioning, but there are thunderstorms that just come out of nowhere. So sometimes you might, I always like to film in the thunderstorms, but sometimes you won't get the shot, and that's part of wildlife film. You can go out all day, maybe even weeks, and you won't get anything, but that's part of the job. So, and I've learned through my experience, overcoming the elements. As I learned through my experience, overcoming the elements is key to getting some of the most unique and one-of-a-kind wildlife behaviors. So what were some memorable experiences that y'all had while shooting? It can be anything from magical wildlife encounters to a funny situation, or even a super dangerous one. Alex, what's yours?
Well, back coming off of what Jeff was saying, I spent close to a month on that tiny little dirt island called Santa Barbara Island, filming the California brown pelican. And it was it's an incredible experience, because it was something growing up in California that I'd kind of seen on a close to a daily basis, but had never really thought more about. And so we were filming the nesting to the chicks, and then growing up and fledging from the island. And that process is takes about 9 weeks for them to fully fledge. But we were there for a few weeks capturing that, and it was incredible. The first time we saw a baby pelican, I've never seen something that looks more like a dinosaur. And it was incredible to watch these tiny little gray nuggets turn into these beautiful birds. But it was incredible to watch how clumsy they were and how they grew up. And like I said earlier, growing up in California and watching and seeing them, it was incredible to be able to kind of see the whole process, because it's on this island away from the mainland where all of this growing up and all of this behavior happens, and then you only really get to see them when they're fully fledged. So I think for me, that was the coolest experience, getting to see the whole kind of behind the scenes life of an animal that I'd kind of grown up seeing. And it really kind of blew my mind that so much happens on this tiny little island, like out at sea with no one else around.
That's so funny you mentioned about the birds being more like dinosaurs. I noticed that a lot of baby birds will either be like really cute and fluffy, or like very dinosaur. It is like either one or the other. But the Fitz team, what is the most wildest thing that y'all came across in Key Biscayne? I keep saying Key Biscayne. Biscayne National Park.
Want me to jump in?
Go for it.
I would say for me, living in Florida, we see tons of alligators, and I've worked off and on with alligators for all these years. Miami is the northernmost part of the range for crocodiles. So I worked for me, an unusual place. It was at the nuclear power plant that Florida Power and Light runs, sort of near Homestead. And like NASA, they have a huge amount of land around them that's protected, and they don't want anybody encroaching and building. And so the wildlife is thriving there. And so I was able to work with their biologists to do the crocodile sequence, which was just tons of fun. And the biologist is doing such a great job kind of keeping tabs on the growing population, and they're really doing well. And that means that he would, when a nest hatches out, he would catch some of the little guys and tag them, mark them so that they could really keep track of things. And that helped me get a few shots, which was great. And he was very welcoming, and he set me up in some great places. And I just have this vivid memory of sort of one afternoon being in the nesting area, and we were working on a fire ant sequence at the same time. And as he left me alone there, he just kind of casually said, "Tom, just remember that you're in a croc nesting area. So, once in a while, glance towards the water just to make sure that there's, nobody coming up to the nest." It got my attention. And anyway, it was just great fun. And it was unusual to be working at a power plant, to be getting such lovely wildlife footage because it is so well protected.
Well, I think for me, we've talked a little bit about bad weather, and I actually really, really enjoyed. There was one day I have this vivid memory of when we were filming in the mangroves, and this huge squall came in, and the weather got really bad really quickly. And I've always known, how important mangroves are, and everyone will learn in the show, that they're really important as nurseries for growing animals, and then also for our cities and for us as people, protection from storm surges and erosion. And it was amazing to actually feel that firsthand in a storm, and to be, you really don't want to be in the water when a bad storm comes in usually, but because we were in the mangroves, I felt very safe and protected by them. And it was a really beautiful kind of surreal feeling to just be there hunkered down with the camera and have these huge rain droplets and gusting wind, and to feel very safe still and kind of get to experience that with all of the other animals that were taking shelter there. And as well, getting to see and witness the nesting sea turtles was a really special experience, under the full moon with lightning in the background. We got really lucky with weather for those shoots too. And yeah, it's just incredible to see these mom turtles really giving it their all, because they are big animals and they're graceful in the water, but when they're on land, they're struggling to get themselves up the beach, and they go far up the beach. And then they lay these eggs, and then they cover them up, and they go. It was just really beautiful to see how much effort goes into it, and to be able to witness that as well as film it.
So I have a technical question about that. I was recently shooting in the dry tortugas, and we were filming loggerhead sea turtles be released by someone that actually helped incubate them. But what we used a bunch of red lights, because I know that if you use a regular flashlight, they'll be distracted, not know where to go. Did you use any red lights in this situation?
We did both. We used infrared light for one of the cameras, and we also had a very, very light sensitive camera, and we timed it with the moon so that we could use the moonlight. And that, I have to say, was pretty spectacular, because you could get wide scenes of, the turtles up close, but with all the stuff that was going on, that with infrared light, you can only, really, the camera could just see where the pool of light is. And so with other cameras that are incredibly light sensitive, it gives you the whole beach. And that was really pretty spectacular.
And also challenging, because as the person lighting it, I couldn't see what I was lighting, and because it's invisible to me, but it's visible to the camera, so we're not disturbing the sea turtles. But that was challenging too, to kind of be doing it blindly.
We had some entertaining conversations about that.
We did.
To the right, no, to the left, no, not that much.
I'm sure the father-daughter stuff is like, okay, no, you go over there. No, you go over there, Dad. You know, I could see that. But Erin, I see you didn't get eaten by a grizzly bear. Thank God. So what was the most memorable thing that happened on your shoot?
I think memorable would actually be the chance to work with family, just one-on-one. I've worked with Tom and Phoebe, Team Fitz, before, and it's incredible to see their teamwork, two incredible filmmakers working together. So even though my uncle is not a cameraman and he will never be a cameraman, it was really fun to spend those mornings really, really early before the light was up, out on the boat, going to different islands, and, you know, coming in the evening. My uncle's quite soft-spoken. It's hard to pull stories out of him, but once you get him going, like, he spent so many years flying for fish and game. I got to learn so much about sea otters and so much about their reintroductions. The sea otters from Alaska were used for reintroductions in Southeast Alaska, in Washington, in BC. So getting to just spend that time with family and kind of, you know, share the frustrations when things weren't going well, but also share the successes when things were going well. So that would be my probably most memorable part of this filming experience, was just that time with family. We can all be a little envious of Team Fitz, but I got to have a taste of it, which was nice.
You know, a lot of times you end up working with your family on this kind of stuff. My brother actually flies drones, so he always will come with me and toss the drone up, and I'll be sitting there kind of directing him, like, no, I wanted to go this way. No, I wanted to go this way. So it's really fun working with family, for sure. And so completely changing it. Jeff, what really inspiring or memorable or wild or dangerous things happened on your shoot?
Yeah, I'd say one of the most memorable, for sure. I mean, there were a lot of memorable moments, and like other people have said, like just getting to spend so much time in a place that I would normally not spend that much time was just yeah, incredible. But I would say one of the most memorable moments was one of those days when we got out to Santa Barbara Island, and it was like everything had come together. You know, it was like a lake, flat calm out there. Visibility was incredible. The kelp forest was super healthy. And it was just kind of right after the sea lion pupping season too. So we had all of these like juvenile sea lions, all these pups that were in the water that just wanted to play. And so we were trying to figure out ways to get these tracking shots through the kelp forest of all of these sea lions playing. And all they wanted to do was just mob us, because we were on open circuit. So we had these bubbles coming off of us, and they just like thought that was the most entertaining thing in the world. But they all wanted to be behind us was the issue. So what we ended up doing, we had a couple underwater scooters with us, and I had my assistant just get on an underwater scooter and just ride in front of me. So he was exhausting bubbles and they were mobbing him. And then that allowed me, there was enough of them. There was probably like 40 of them cruising through the kelp forest. And that allowed me on my scooter with the camera mount to be able to like track behind and actually get shots with just the kelp and the sea lions. And it was just, I mean, it was all play. Like we were playing, the sea lions were playing. It was just like such a joyful, I mean, couple dives that like, I didn't want to get out of the water. It was definitely one of those like experiences that I'll remember for the rest of my life. And, you know, and I think the imagery turned out pretty well. And yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy that in the episode.
I remember, so I watched part of this episode. There was one shot that you got where there's so many sea lions and it's this really wide shot. It really reminds me of a Renaissance painting. And I never really thought that like sea lions could look like a Renaissance painting, but the way the lighting was working with you that day, it really looked like a painting. And that was like, I remember when we were watching, I was like, oh my God, like that was like a very like, wow shot for me personally. So let's talk equipment. I know it takes specialized equipment and gear to for a lot of these places, a lot of these shots. So I know, Erin, you use that big, beefy, long lens of yours. What special equipment did you use?
So I shot this on actually the Red Epic W, so my Red, and then a CN20, so the 50 to 1000 Canon lens. We tried to actually keep it pretty simple kit-wise. Again, it was just me. So I tried to condense it down as much as I could and then hop off with my bag and my big tripod and just go for the day, bring a snack. But yeah, no, I just needed a lot of reach because the otters, you know, they move in and out quite a bit. I'm doing it all from the coast. We didn't have gimbals on the boat. It's it's not invasive at all, which is really, really nice with otters. They just kind of do their own thing. They don't even notice you're on shore. So yeah, it was a simple setup, but a really, really efficient setup for what we were doing.
I've seen your kit. You just walk around with the whole thing on your back and just go as far as possible. That is something I really want to build out for myself, as a nice big kit. But we were talking about that shot that you got, Jeff, with the big wide shot of the sea lions. How did you get that? What equipment did you use?
Yeah, so a lot of it was a lot of those tracking shots were like red, either helium or Gemini, in a Gates underwater housing, and either mounted to an underwater scooter, or it's also called a DPV, and to get some of those like tracking shots through the kelp, or just me free swimming. A lot of the times I like to use carbon fiber free diving fins because you can go pretty quickly, but there's not much movement translated to the camera, so they will end up being super stable. But for a lot of it, a lot of the sequences we were doing were benthic, so Garibaldi and sheephead, and a lot of the times you need to be, especially underwater, you need to be super close to things, because you just lose so much of the visibility. There gets to be a lot of particulate the more water you have to shoot through. So a lot of the times we're super close and super wide. And so that often calls for something called a rebreather, which is a different type of scuba that there's no bubbles. You can stay underwater for quite a bit of time. It's all in this closed loop. And so that would allow us to kind of like set up, we used a lot of grip underwater too, either marinized tripods and fluid heads or marinized Dana dollies. Unlike Erin was smarter. She kept it simple. I just like threw all of the equipment on the boat and be like, we'll see what we can use. But yeah, so a lot of times we would get down there, set up the equipment, and it would initially kind of disturb the animals. But, once after, 5-10 minutes, they would kind of settle back into their natural behavior. And I think the rebreathers were key for that. I think if we were constantly blowing bubbles, they would not want to be around us. We'd be too loud and annoying for them to do what they were trying to do.
So you're making like a whole film set underwater. So did you go up and down and like grab stuff, set it up, grab stuff, set it up?
Depending on the amount of kit we had, yes. The Dana dollies can be quite a bit of stuff. It's a lot of like speed rail, and then the whole dolly plate, and then the fluid head and the housing as well. I typically always have an assistant or safety diver with me. So he usually carries a lot of things in on a lift bag. So, sometimes it would usually be like 2 trips.
So okay. I'm like thinking about using a Dana dolly underwater. So did you park the camera in front of for example, in the sheephead sequence? It's sheephead, right? Yeah. The sheephead sequence. Did you park the camera in front of an urchin and just wait for one to come? Or you just did you learn their behavior and then think, okay, this one looks like the prime one they're going to want to eat?
That honestly took a lot of time as well to work out. That was pretty interesting, and talking with a lot of different scientists that were studying urchins and urchin barons and sheephead and different predators of the urchins. That's a lot longer like explanation, but there were a lot of urchins that we would park on that for some reason the sheephead wouldn't want to eat at all. And what we were talking with the scientists later was that when the urchin reached this point where, so one of the issues that kelp forests are facing is something called urchin barons. And that's when the urchins just overwhelm the kelp forest. And urchins love kelp. They love eating algae. And if they don't have any predators that are keeping the urchins in check, the urchins proliferate and they can just mow down the kelp forest, which is really sad because it's this whole 3-dimensional structure. Like, think of Manhattan, like it's this bustling city. It's this nursery ground. It's incredibly important for a lot of different things. But what happens once the urchins roll through this kelpy area, it's called, they create something called an urchin barren. And so you just have tons of urchins on the bottom, no more kelp forest. It's pretty sad. It's pretty depressing. It's like becomes a desert. But what happens to those urchins is now that they don't have any food to eat, there's no like roe inside of them. There's no meat inside of them. And the scientist was saying that they think that the predators can sense that. And so they're not going to exert the energy to go and try to eat that urchin now. So there were multiple times where we'd park on an urchin thinking, and there's like tons of sheephead around, and we're like, okay, this is going to be great. This is going to be the shot. And we'd sit there for hours, and we're trying to figure out, like, is it us? Are we disturbing the behavior? What's going on? And but then we would go and set up like right on the edge of the marine protected area. And so this Santa Barbara Island has this marine protected area, this no take zone, where the fish are able to live a full and healthy life, have a ton of babies, and grow to these, you know, giant sizes. And when we set up there, they would just devour the urchins within seconds. They didn't care that we were around at all. So it was really interesting kind of working this whole thing out and really seeing the importance of marine protected areas and no take zones for a healthy ecosystem.
So it sounds like a lot of time and patience goes into shooting this kind of stuff. How long did y'all spend out in the field altogether?
That's a good question. I think I did about 220 days across the 3 episodes.
220 days.
Yeah,
Wow.
a lot of time. I think we did about 60, about 2 and a bit months on the Channel Islands, maybe a little bit more.
So you would do like a couple months here, a couple months there. Did you change it according to season? Did you like make sure, okay, I want to be fall, winter?
So because we were shooting, I also shot on the last season, the Yosemite episode, and the Big Bend. So basically just bouncing back and forth the whole year between different national parks. And so we started the season ending the winter season in November in Yosemite, filming the spring just before the winter, and then that then transitioned and basically worked through the parks in the different seasons. And that's what's so interesting, telling a story about a place, is that you really do get to see how it changes over the seasons, and how especially following the different animals, like filming the fox. The foxes for the Channel Islands episode, we were following them moving through the islands, and they focus on different food sources throughout the year. And so that was really interesting, following them from the open grasslands and the meadows where they were hunting the crickets in one season, to then later in the season, when the figs are ripe, they would actually climb the trees to eat the figs. And it was one of the strangest things ever, seeing a fox kind of 20 feet up above you climbing in a tree. So it took us quite a long time, but we finally found one fox that was, every day we would manage to find it when it was just coming, and then we'd film it going up into the fig trees and climbing along these tiny, tiny branches to eat the figs. But it's always so interesting watching how an animal moves through its environment in different seasons, and looking at the different food sources and the different resources it uses. We were filming a fox on Santa Cruz Island that was actually using the moisture. So the moisture would come in through the clouds, and we were driving along looking for foxes moving along the ridges and the open ridgelands, and we came across this puddle. And what we realized was the fog was coming in, hitting the trees, and that was dripping onto the road, and that was so much water dripping that it actually ran and created this small pool. And so we thought, okay, this is probably somewhere where this is the only water around. This is probably being utilized by the foxes. And so we set up a hide. We set up a camera trap first to see if the foxes were using it, and they were. And so then we went back, and it took us about 3 days, but we finally got a fox coming down to the water that was created from the fog, and drinking in the small tiny pool, which was amazing just to see how they kind of utilize like every aspect of their environment.
I'm sure you worked really closely with the National Park Service and rangers. Did they help give you any sort of guidance of where possibly to look?
Yeah, and the park service and the staff across the board for every single park I worked with are invaluable. And like Tom was saying, with the assistance from the scientists, these are people that are on the ground studying these animals every day, and they have just such a wealth of knowledge. And it's an incredible starting point for us as filmmakers, to be able to go and take this breadth of knowledge of this person or people that have studying these animals, to then use that to jumpstart what we're looking for. And then it really kind of, you use that information and their like they'll be like, okay, this is where you go. And so we had one spot for the foxes. We had one spot where they really liked, and so we got directed into that area and different animals. And we have very heavily relied on the information and the resources provided by the park services and the other scientists and conservationists that utilize and study these areas. I think without them, it would have been a very, very hard film to make.
So you work really closely with those folks working at the parks, scientists, conservationists, the rangers. And I know actually in the Biscayne episode, Tom and Phoebe, you guys shot the butterflies and you see a lot of them being released. Could you tell me more about those conservation stories that you guys came across?
Well, it's pretty neat that the scientists up in Gainesville are they're just doing a great job. So this type of butterfly was, almost not in existence anymore, and they're doing a remarkable job of getting things going up in their lab setting and then bringing them down and releasing them. And so it was fun to be, a part of that kind of a science-driven sequence and to have their help. I mean, we would have been pretty lost if we simply went to Elliott Key and tried to, film butterflies on our own. So it was great. And I'll say too that, along those lines, you never quite know in a wildlife film where you're going to score well and where not. We teamed up with different scientists to do a coral spawning sequence for some of the underwater work that we did. And they were just great, and they can pinpoint to the pretty much exact time when coral is gonna spawn at night in August. But it sort of waxes and wanes a bit. Some years are a bigger spectacle, and some years less. And sadly for us, it was sort of a lesser year. It was still amazing to see and amazing to be a part of working so closely with scientists who really, really understand something so well. And anyway, it was a super fun couple of nights that we had. Didn't quite give us the rewards to make it into the film, but it's part of the process.
So everyone here is American. So what does this series mean to you as Americans who grew up playing in, hiking in, and visiting these parks? I'll start with you, Erin.
I think it's really exciting to see so many American cinematographers on this series. Oftentimes there are a lot of British cinematographers on the series, so it was pretty cool to be able to kind of film in our backyards, essentially. For me too, like being able to share sea otters is always nice. They've been through so much from, the pelt trade. In 1911, there were less than 2,000 otters because of the pelt trade in Russia. And then the Exxon Valdez spill in 1989, like that wiped out a huge number of sea otters as well. So getting to share these animals, even after everything they've been through, is really exciting. And just to get people excited about, their own backyards and getting them wanting to explore these areas is always a treat.
I'm all about that. That is my whole thing. I want people to go outside and get into their backyards. They don't need to travel super far away to see something incredible. So, Jeff, what does this mean to you?
Yeah, I'd say, the Channel Islands have been in my backyard for quite a few years now. And yeah, they aren't as accessible as some of the other national parks, but that's where I was so excited to be a part of this series, because I actually get to show people how amazing that they can be. And yeah, so I think that whole aspect was really special, because even before this series, the kelp forest is one of the most amazing. It's kind of like my sanctuary. I love being underwater in the Channel Islands. And yeah, I think, I often tell people that if I had one place to dive for the rest of my life, and I've been incredibly fortunate to get to dive all over the world, it would be Santa Barbara Island. And so I think it's just, I can't quite, words can't quite express how much it means to me. And so, yeah, I'm just really excited to get to show people the imagery from this place and to hopefully get them, inspired to try to hop on a boat and to go for a little snorkel tour, or, try to get dive certified and go check it out. Or, Santa Cruz has some amazing hiking trails to be able to go wander around and see the amazing foxes that Alex filmed. Or even just even coastal, there's amazing kelp forests right here along the coast that I think people don't necessarily know about or understand. So yeah, just getting people excited. like Erin said, to go and check these places out that are right in our backyard.
I love picking around the shore in that region. That's like one of my favorite things, is just pulling over the car and picking around the shore. You can find so much. So Phoebe and Tom, what does this mean to you?
It means a lot. I mean, as someone that lives very much like in the city of Miami, I really like that Biscayne National Park, while a lot of it is, kind of hard to access and you do need a boat, a lot of it is really close and it is accessible for people. And I think it's really cool. And it's something that I love about living in a city like Miami, is that we can have the city and it's very modern, and but then we also have the natural areas really, really close, and that they can live in harmony together if we really work for it. And so, there were a lot of areas where people can just get in on their kayaks or their paddle boards, or they can be snorkeling around. And it was amazing to get to tell these stories and also get to see other people enjoying it. And that meant a lot to me too.
And I think that the national parks really are a great example that conservation and protection work, and that wildlife thrives when we do that, and that we really are completely interconnected with everything on the planet, and it certainly is in our best interest to understand that, and so I think that our national parks really show the best of that kind of protection, which I think we all need to aspire to in a broader way.
That proximity that Miami has to the natural world is just one of those reasons why I came down here. And literally just being able to drive 5 minutes and see a gator, or even walk 2 minutes to the grocery store. I always say this when I talk about why I love Miami so much, is when you walk 2 minutes to the grocery store, you see these curly-tailed lizards run right out in front of you. Now that happened to me when I was visiting, and I knew like that was the place I'm going to be. So which brings me actually to my next question. This is my favorite thing I like to include in all of these interviews. Whenever I come back from a shoot, or even actually growing up, whenever we come back from hiking, we would talk about what were your peaches in your pits of your adventure. So your peach being the best part and the pit being the worst. For example, when I was in Big Cypress, I saw the cutest gator I have literally ever seen in my life. I don't know what was like genetically maybe different about this. I have no idea. Its eye was huge. You can see a little bit of the white, and it had like a really stout like nose. It was so cute. So that was my peach of that day. But my pit was, I was using DEET, and I put a little bit on my hands and I touched my face, and I actually ended up getting it in my mouth, which tasted horrible, but also it made my lips numb, and it kind of like never went away. So that was my pit of that day. So what was y'all's peaches and pits? I'll start with you, Alex.
That's a tough question. I don't think there was a pit. I think the peach would just be like echoing what everyone said earlier, just being able to spend so much time. It's always amazing to be able to spend time with animals, and kind of especially animals that you have, go back to what I said earlier about the pelican, other animals that you've sort of seen on a daily basis maybe, but you haven't actually had the opportunity or the time for whatever reason to kind of sit down and just watch it. And that's what I always do, is whenever I'm filming something, I usually spend at least one day just watching it, but then I always wish I'd run and grab the camera. But it's always fascinating just to sit there and observe, and just sort of be this fly on the wall of everything that's going on. And the amazing thing about the national parks, that there is so much going on. And I just loved that sort of wherever you looked, there was always a story happening, and it was amazing to be able to kind of follow these animals around on foot and be able to walk through the parks and just see what they get up to on their daily life. And I just love, just seeing all these little animals running around. And it's the amazing thing about the parks is it is this amazing protected area that is sort of, it's there for the animals, and it is there for the people to go and be in nature. And so it's the perfect place to sort of go out for the day and just pick an animal and wander around and see what it gets up to.
Erin, what was your peach and pit?
So I did have a pit. The sea otters were really uncooperative at the beginning of this. They were really, really skittish. The weather took them out into an area that we actually couldn't really film in. So that was kind of the pit was the start. We had a lot of issues even getting otters around. The Peach, I love being out by myself. Like the fact that I got to spend that amount of time out in remote Alaska by myself, that's always really nice. It's different when you don't have anyone else around and you can just take in every single thing around you. And you do have to be a bit more aware because obviously bears can walk up, that kind of stuff. But I really think it's a different experience when you are completely on your own and no one else is on this little island with you. So I quite like that. I think that's my Peach.
Thank God you didn't get 8. Jeff, what was your Peach and pit?
Yeah, I'd say the pit for me was, I felt a lot of responsibility and a lot of like pressure because I love this place so much, love the kelp forest and the island so much that I wanted to show them at their, in their best light, essentially. And so I think the pit for me was just, I think I got into that like headspace a bit too much. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist and, day after day of just getting out there and not having the conditions that I wanted, that like I wanted to show people, was just, that started getting frustrating for me. So I kind of had to like reset my mindset and just be like, okay, I'm not necessarily going to get 100-foot visibility in this kelp forest. Everything might not come together, but people are still going to love and appreciate 50-foot viz because they've never seen anything different too. So I think just getting over that perfectionist mindset was it's also a Peach too, because it's helping me evolve as a wildlife filmmaker. But and then I think the Peach, to kind of echo what Alex was saying, just to get the time. I mean, to sit down underwater is so different than topside. We only have, on the islands, mostly you're seeing about 50 feet maybe of what is around you underwater. And so, just to get the opportunity and the time to just sit on the reef and just watch everything, like watch what these fish are doing over here. And you see, it's this whole bustling world that we just get tiny little glimpses into. But I think that was just really special. Is you start to notice a lot more when you just sit and watch. And I think I definitely gained a lot of appreciation for I think people sometimes think like fish are dumb or like different animals on the reef are not the most intelligent or whatever, but I think you start to see a lot of character. You start to see a lot of intelligence and culture, and it's their own world, and just because it's different than ours doesn't mean it's lesser, I think. And so just a massive appreciation for the natural world.
That's actually something I've been learning a lot about recently, is how much personality fish can have. Like I've been going, again, I keep talking about Key Biscayne, but I've been going there and there's these little puffers that just will follow you around because they're waiting for you to kick up the sand. But you realize after a while, like these are like little buddies, like they're so cute and like they have such personality. Anyway, Phoebe, what was your Peach and pit?
Well, I mean, speaking of personality, there was one day where this little baby manatee was just so curious about my paddleboard. And, I had like a life jacket strapped to the back that was kind of dangling off, and he was trying to eat the straps, and he was just kind of rolling around and trying to itch himself on the paddleboard. And I mean, as Jeff has said, like it's just really, really special when an animal like actually wants to interact with you and is really curious about you. So that was a Peach for sure. And a pit was then actually, I got to smell manatee breath for the first time. And it doesn't smell good because I'm usually under the water with manatees, spent a lot of time with them, but always in the water. And this is the first time that I was above on a paddleboard. And but then, I mean, on a more serious note, I would say a pit was the coral spawning that Tom touched on that, just didn't really go as planned. And it's kind of disheartening to know that it can be such a spectacle. And obviously coral are such an important part of our world. And it's, concerning to feel like maybe we have something to do with, them having an off year like that. But yeah, and then overall another peach is just that I get to work with my dad, and that's my peach for all these jobs, is that's really special.
Well, Tom, what's your peach and pit?
That was very well said, Phoebe. And I agree too, working with her. My peach was very clear. It's funny. And it harkens back maybe, Jeff, to what you were talking about too. When you have a chance, when you've been working hard, and you're focused with the camera and you're just working, when you finally have a chance to sit back and in a bigger picture, just kind of take it all in. I had that, I remember on the first turtle sequence, the nesting sequence, we'd been working hard all night long, and it was probably about 4 a.m. and, we really had done most of our work for the night. And I just remember sort of heaving a sigh of relief. The full moon was up. It was spectacular. And Phoebe and I were just there with a lot of turtles up on the beach. And it was just such a high to be able to relax. We'd done good work that night, and just to take it all in, that for me was absolutely a peach experience for this film. And I think I can pinpoint the one pit, as you put it. For all the work that we all do, you always have to kind of dress the part and wear appropriate clothing, whether it's sun protection or bug protection or weather protection, or, in the water, what you're wearing for warmth. And I do that, but once in a while you can get lax. And I had some work to do with the fire ants and some time-lapse stuff that was right next to the lab where we were working with the crocs. And so like a dummy, I was out in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops, and we're working with fire ants. And so not so bright. And fire ants, I swear, they'll get onto your, whatever body part, in this case, my right foot. And they don't just bite, they kind of all climb up quietly. And then they go 1, 2, 3, get him. And it's no fun. That was my pit.
I get that. Well, I could just chat with you guys all day, and I have so many more questions, but we just don't have the time. With that, I want to say thank you all for joining me today. And it's been such a treat to learn about how this series was made, and I'm so pumped to watch the rest of it. I watched a little bit. I can't wait to binge the rest. Make sure you catch America's National Parks premiering on National Geographic Monday, June 5th at 9/8 Central and June 6th on Disney+. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.